going to now introduce you to our keynote speaker, which you saw in the film, Comrade Siphiwe Baleka. And he is just returning from his second trip to Burkina Faso. And this time he was there with the RBG plus 126 delegation. And so we're excited to hear his report. And Comrade Siphiwe is a leader in the reparations, Pan-African, and lineage restoration movements. He has represented New African and Afro-descendant peoples at the United Nations, at the African Union, and other international forums. He's always advocating for self-determination and the right of return to our ancestral homelands. So among his many achievements, he has successfully guided the Balenta people who were once enslaved in the Americas back to Guinea-Bissau, where he now resides and where they all hold citizenship. So please join me in welcoming Comrade Siphiwe Baleka. And I'm going to ping you to the screen.
Amasa Ganalu, Abene, Obrigado, thank you. Salamta, Sawubona, and Sumba. Greetings to all my comrades, family, friends. Let me start by acknowledging the unity of our ancestors, all of us who are here present, and the unborn. Because in our African tradition, there is a unity between the three, past, present, and future. Ancestors, those of us that are living on earth now, and the unborn. And I hope that the overriding theme today will be unity. I know I was asked to give a keynote address. I'm just going to talk to everyone. And that's going to be the underlying theme. The need is unity and the solution is unity. And we're going to talk about that in the context of what was actually my third mission to Burkina Faso since May 2024. So I've been there 3 times. Before I get into this most recent visit, given that we are on the eve of the 138th Earth Light of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, I'd like to read some words of Marcus Garvey that were, it's a collection of words that were spoken in and around 1924. Marcus Garvey said, "Let the Negro couple the urge for money with nationalism, so that in another 100 years, that's now, he will have a formidable and well-established nation to protect him anywhere he happened to find himself with his wealth." Let me stop there and ask the question, do we have such a nation yet? Isn't this what our hopes and aspirations for Burkina Faso and the Alliance of Sahel States is all about? That it will blossom into a united African states that is so powerful that it can protect all African people everywhere on the planet, on the globe? This is what Garvey was saying. He said that in 1924, 100 years ago. That's 2025 now. We're still in the process of building that nation. Garvey continues, he says, "There is no better place than Africa, his original home. The Negroes of the world should concentrate on making money and using part of it for the helping to establish an independent nationalism in Africa. The thoughtful and industrious of our race want to go back to Africa because we realize it will be our only hope of permanent existence. We cannot all go in a day or in a year, 10 or 20 years. It will take time under the rule of modern economics to entirely or largely depopulate a country of a people who have been its residents for centuries. But we feel that with proper help for 50 years, the problem can be solved. Let me stop there. 50 years from 1924 is 1974. And yet, the vast majority of us, almost 250 million of us, right, are still living in the land of our captivities. Not all of us are going to go back to Africa, but we have to ask the question. If Marcus Garvey said, it'll take about 50 years, and now we're 74, we're 100 years. The continent has not granted us, recognized our right to return and our citizenship. Some countries are. Burkina Faso is in the process. But out of the 54 nations on the African continent that are members of the African Union, it's only a small handful that are just beginning to recognize our right to return. So we're late. The hour is late, which is why we have to come together, why unity is the theme, is the focus, is the priority, is the solution. Let me continue a little bit more with Garvey's words. Garvey says, men, there is much to live for, and there is much to die for. The man, the race of nation that is not prepared to risk life itself for the possession of an ideal shall lose that ideal. If you, I repeat, must be free, you yourselves must strike the blow. Any sane man, race, or nation that desires freedom must first of all think in terms of blood. Why, even the Heavenly Father tells us that without the shedding of blood, there can be no remission of sins. Then how in the name of God, with history before us, do we expect to redeem Africa without preparing ourselves, some of us, to die? Leadership means everything: pain, blood, death. Let Africa be our guiding star, our star of destiny. Those are the words of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. We are on the eve of his 138th Earthlight. I thought those words were appropriate because when we get right down to it, this is what we admire about President Ibrahim Traoré. He is striking the blow, and he is not afraid of death. He is taking a fearless stand against the imperialists that are daily trying to assassinate him, trying to destabilize and take control of his country and the region through the Alliance of Sahel States. And all three of those presidents and the vast majority of those people are standing up, resisting the imperialists, the French neocolonialists, knowing that some of them may lose their life. Many of them already have, when you consider the jihadist attacks. That's what makes this moment so serious and such a pertinent moment in our history right now. One other thing I'd like to do before I forget is connect Marcus Mosiah Garvey to Malcolm X. Many people may know that Malcolm X's father was, when Marcus Garvey was petitioning the League of Nations, Malcolm X's father was in charge of collecting signatures. And in that process, he was found murdered on the trolley tracks. This is a direct link between Marcus Garvey and Malcolm X. We have people in this chat right now who knew Malcolm X quite well, and they are the link to us. So right now, for me, it's an honor and a privilege to be in this moment, to be the link between Marcus, Malcolm, all of us, and President Traoré right now in this moment. And it was also an honor and a privilege to be included in the film of my brother Getachew in Ethiopia. I can't wait to see the finished product. I thank you for your 13 years of labor to put out propaganda that we need at this time with our current voices. What we are experiencing right now, just as Marcus came and was the center pole that more than 11 million of us rallied around in a moment that has not been duplicated since. Just as that time was special, right now we are in a special moment where we are rallying around the Sahel Alliance and the face of that alliance right now, which is President Ibrahim Traoré. I was honored and privileged to be a part of a delegation that went to Burkina Faso in May of 2024. It was led by Her Excellency Ambassador Erikana Chihombori-Quao. That was a historic meeting because it wasn't the first time that African diasporans had gone to Burkina Faso. That had been happening for decades. It may not have even been the first time that a group of Afro-descendants met with President Traoré. But that meeting was recorded and went viral. We all know that Ambassador Erikana Chihombori-Quao has been our voice, our fearless voice out there denouncing the imperialists and the neocolonialists in Africa. And she led that delegation. So the meeting between, say, Mama Africa and our warrior son, Prince Traoré, was very special. Following that, I was able to be a part of the Friends of President Ibrahim Traoré in the West delegation that was organized by attorney Malik Zulu Shabazz, that extended the agenda and the mission of Afro-descendants, New Africans, Pan-Africanists of all stripes and persuasions, who by now were protesting and standing up on behalf of President Ibrahim Traoré when he was attacked, targeted by US AFRICOM Commander General Michael Langley, former AFRICOM commander, because he has now lost his job. And so the parallels between Garvey's time and this time continue, because following Garvey, we know the Italians invaded Ethiopia, and all around the world, Black people stood up in defense of Ethiopia and volunteered to defend Ethiopia. And so this is again what we're seeing. When General Langley in the United States targeted President Ibrahim Traoré, the Black world stood up in defense of the I would say leader, or one of the three leaders of self-determination and Pan-Africanism on the continent. So in a very real way, history is repeating itself. And the question is what are all of we going to do about it? So the Friends of President Ibrahim Traoré in the West delegation met with the Burkinabe officials, committed to sending a delegation, building that relationship, and setting up a headquarters so that we would have boots on the ground, and that our commitment would go beyond slogans, beyond protesting in the street, that it would become intensified and tangible. Following that delegation, another great, I'll say leader worker, because it's the workers who are the leaders, my good brother and comrade Yao, organized the RBG, Red, Black, and Green 126 plus delegation. That refers to the citizenship that was granted in Ghana, that he was instrumental. And he will be speaking later, and he can talk a little bit about that. But he organized a delegation. Like all the delegations, there are many that are coming to Burkina Faso. And we all have the same sentiment, the same mission, the same desire to express our support for President Ibrahim Traoré, and to find a way to contribute to the revolution that is taking place in the Sahel, that we hope will take over the entire continent and bring about Garvey's dream of a united African states with sufficient power to protect all of us. So in that sense, I've been a part of three, what I would call diplomatic missions between Afro descendants, also known as New Africans or Black people in the West, who really don't have a government of their own, to meet with the government. They're diplomatic missions. And so my role has been to be something of a professional diplomat, something that started for me back in 2003, once again in Addis Ababa, when the African Union was founded and they amended their constitution with the Article 3Q amendment that invited and encouraged the full participation of the African diaspora in the building of the African Union. And I remember as a young man at that time, being in the building, being in the room with the heads of state of Africa, and remembering that was part of Garvey's dream, that there would be an independent Africa. So as a young man, that made a huge impression on me. In fact, it actually epigenetically encoded in my DNA, that moment, that spirit of unity. Because here it was that the heads of state of Africa were putting out their arms and saying, it's time for the Africans abroad to come home and be one with us. That was the spirit. Now, over the past 22 years, at that time, we didn't know what it would be. But we now have had 22 years of experience with the African Union. I'm not going to go into that too deeply. But they have not been able to achieve what is called positive sovereignty. And they are very far from Garvey and Nkrumah's dream of a united Africa. They are still just an intergovernmental association, right? A social club of African heads of states. with some structures to discuss policies which they have no power to actually enforce. And so that is why we African people, the holders of sovereignty, have to find a way to unite. Because if you think about it, right now, each one of you, you're breathing. That is the sovereign power that comes from the divine creator that is inherent in you. It is the life force energy. It is natural law. Your heart is beating, your lungs are pumping, the life force energy, the power is in with you. Nobody can take that from you. When we take that natural sovereignty and agree to mutualize it, to compact it into a confederation, a federation, or some form of unitary government, all of that individual sovereignty is collected and creates what we call government. And government then uses that sovereignty, that authority, to organize in the most intelligent ways the union between human resources and natural resources. That's called an economy. And when we have leaders of integrity who have capable ministers, educated and intelligent, who put service and sacrifice ahead of their own personal needs, they will then organize the human resources with the natural resources in the way to meet the needs of the people. This is what has been lacking in Africa. However, this is what we are witnessing in Burkina Faso. We are seeing that President Ibrahim Traoré has enough people around him. Not all of the people, not all of his government officials, but he has enough. And there's enough genuine love and support from the Burkinabe people that we are witnessing intelligent organization of the Burkinabe resources and human resources to create factories, to build electric cars, to process gold, to create a new patriotic culture that puts the indigenous Burkinabe culture first. This is why we love him. This is why we're supporting him. This is why we're making sacrifices. This is why we're willing to invest. Because a lot of us have become so jaded and so disappointed with opportunities that didn't pan out, bad leadership, misappropriation of funds, disorganization, corruption. We see that that's changing. And all of the missions that I went on, every delegate will attest to the warm spirit of the Burkinabe people themselves, the warm reception, this buzz, this spirit of a new day in Burkina Faso, particularly coming from the youth, Pan-African spirit. We see change. This last delegation, we went and visited a modern apartment complex, the electric car place. We see all of the fruits of the kind of advanced development that those of us in the West have become accustomed to. We see it happening, but with a pronounced and decided African flavor. So we see so much hope and potential. Now, having said that, let me also say that societies do not change overnight. And in our meeting with the Chief of Staff to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, he made the point that Burkina Faso still has a colonial government bureaucracy. And as a result, any one of us that has spent any time in Africa knows when you're dealing with African government bureaucracy, there's a gap between what we want and what we can imagine and what we can conceive and what we know is right versus their ability to act on it. And so just because President Ibrahim Traoré is leading us into the new Africa that we want, it doesn't mean that the government can move so quickly. And as a result, the last two delegations had to experience that government bureaucracy. As much as they are inviting of us, there are still challenges in getting things done. So it's important for anyone that's interested in not just visiting Burkina Faso, but interested in investing, repatriating, living, to adjust to that reality. Because our expectations are so high because of the propaganda that we see, and all of us know that it's becoming more and more difficult to determine what's actually true versus what is actually real, right? We need to be aware of the very real processes that it's going to take for our relationship and our engagement to develop and blossom. I think my comrade and the leader of the RBG 126 delegation, he may have more to say about this. There's a few other things that I want to emphasize, and then I'll seal up here. So if I get maybe just a few more minutes, is that okay, Sister Tawhida?
Yeah, 2 more minutes.
All right. I didn't know how I was doing on time.
Thank you.
Okay. Amilcar Cabral said, tell no lies, claim no easy victories. One of the biggest challenges that we have right now is our own disunity. And the government officials that we met with also mentioned the fact that because everybody is coming in this uncoordinated, haphazard faction, and everybody wants to meet with President Traoré, and everybody wants to meet with various ministers, that they are becoming overwhelmed. It's becoming a burden. And many of the things that we all want, it's the same thing. And so the government is finding itself having to try to accommodate and meet with all the various groups. Sometimes they're as small as 3, sometimes they're as large as 200. In October, another group of 800 is coming, another group of 200 is coming, planning for next January. There are all these other people that come as individuals with brilliant ideas and projects, but the government is not necessarily equipped to be able to meet with everyone and handle all the requests, all the project proposals. And so they have asked us to find a way to coordinate and work together. And this illustrates the importance of having a headquarters, right, on the ground. We need some Afro-descendant people from the West who are fluent in French and will go through some diplomatic training to staff the headquarters to be able to really assist the government in smoothing out the relationship and the transition and the working relationship between those of us in the West and those on the ground in Burkina Faso. And so we will talk more about this. We have the headquarters, it's open, it's being staffed, we're recruiting. But there were other things I want to say, but I'll wrap up now. And I would simply say that the first step in all of this is demonstrating some unity by signing I think in this session, there's a declaration for building this united front to support President Ibrahim Traoré. It's not a complicated document. It's not a constitution. It's not a rules. It simply says we all share the following basic principles and sentiments. So with that, I'm going to land right here. Maybe there will be other time for questions or some other aspects. I didn't hit everything that needed to be said. Oh, one very quickly. This is very quickly. The other thing, and it goes along with our disorganization, is the disunity. And look, there's a very real concern that Black Americans particularly will be weaponized by the CIA to infiltrate Burkina Faso. That is a very real threat, and it's a historic threat because that's exactly what happened in Nkrumah's time in Ghana. So we have to understand that if Burkina Faso wants to take its time to get to know us and vet us, it's because of this issue, okay? And we have to be mature and sensible about how we balance our right to return, our enthusiasm versus the real security needs. Because it makes sense if you wanted to get to the president and you wanted to destabilize Burkina Faso, it would make sense to what? Buy off and weaponize the African diaspora, the people that are coming. And we all know not all skin folk are kinfolk. So we're going to have to, amongst ourselves, figure out ways to make sure, as Marcus Garvey said, send the right people. With that, I land and thank you.
Thank you so much for that powerful presentation. It was very insightful, and we're going to keep it moving.